Hello, in this video we're going to create a simple asynchronous socket program, client and host. So I'm going to create a new project, call it simple async socket, and create directory for solution. And we're going to change this first project here to TCP client, rename the form to client form. This is just so that we can distinguish between the server and the client easily when we're editing them. Go double click on the form, change the form name to client. There's not going to be many distinguishing features between the two forms, so I'm just going to do this. And our assembly name here is going to be TCP client, and our default namespace is going to be something similar. Okay, now let's add a new project. Call it TCP server. Rename the form to server form. Okay, now let's begin working on the server here. We're going to add some GUI to it. So basically just a text box. And we're going to anchor this, rename it, and make it read only. Now in the client form, we're going to add two buttons and a text box. Okay, so this button here is going to be the connect button. And I'm going to anchor this. I wish these anchor buttons were a bit bigger so I can click them faster. Button send. And send will be disabled by default, because we don't want to be able to send unless we're connected. And I'm going to anchor this. I'm going to anchor this as well. Okay, I'm going to go back to the server and just make sure that accepts return is enabled so that the new lines are shown when I print to it. Okay, and TCP client. Now let's work on the server first. Okay, so we're going to declare our socket, our server socket for listening. We're going to create a method called start server. This method will be responsible for creating our socket and binding our socket and then listening for connections. So try socket is equal to new socket, address family, internetwork, so IPv4, socket type stream, and this is for connection oriented programs. It's what you want. Protocol type TCP, and socket dot bind. We're going to bind on a new IP endpoint. IP address any, so bind on any local interface, and 3333 will be my port. Typically you want to keep it above 1024 because those are reserved ports. In my case it doesn't matter because I'm using the program on a local network, but it's just a good habit to get into. Okay, listen, backlog of 0, kind of like a default thing. Socket.begin accept new async callback, name our method accept callback. I don't like to use on callback because that indicates that it's an event, and this is not quite an event. It's similar though. Okay, now let's define our accept callback method. This async delegate type can point to a method that returns void and accepts parameters of async result. And typical convention is to name your parameter AR. And another try catch. Let's rename the socket here to server socket, and then have another socket called client socket. Okay, and client socket is going to be equal to server socket.end accept, and pass in our async result. And this is going to return a socket, and there's another overload. Let's take a look at that. So yeah, you can send information as you're connecting, but we're not going to do that. Okay, and we're going to just put a basic exception thing here. And we're going to do the same thing for the try catch up top in the start server method. Okay, so after we accept our connection and handle it, we want to start listening on the client socket. Or not listening, but receiving data. So begin receive. Let's go find the overload that we will use. So this is what we want to use. We want to accept our buffer, and then the offset of the buffer to submit data to, and the size of the buffer, socket flags, the async callback, and the object state. So we're going to declare a buffer up top here, byte array buffer. Okay, let's pass in our buffer there, and 0, and then the buffer length, and then async callback, and we're going to call it receive callback. Oh, I think I'm missing these socket flags. My code hinting didn't really do a good job of identifying the overload that I'm using, so I was just having troubles. Sometimes I turn code hinting off and IntelliSense off because I just become too reliant on it, and it's a bad habit. So here's my receive callback. It's going to return void like the other callback and accept a parameter of async result. Call it AR. And before we do this, we need to create our buffer. Since this is a simple app, we're going to create the buffer at the size of the client socket receive buffer size, which is very typical. Typically, the receive and the send buffer size for the sockets are going to be exactly the same. Okay, now I'm going to put stuff in a try catch here, and you may notice that everything that is unhandled in the receive callback, it actually just will terminate the program. So if you don't handle it, it's not going to break, and you won't be able to break into the code for some reason. I've had this problem with all kinds of exceptions, like all of them in the receive callback. So just put everything in a try catch, and you can use ex2string. I do that to just display the entire exception. I don't really know any better way of doing it. Okay, so let's get the text from the buffer. So string text is equal to encoding. We're going to use ASCII because I do believe the default is specific to the operating system and we want it to be consistent. So we're going to use ASCII, and we're going to say get string and pass in our buffer. We can assume that the buffer has been written to because the receive callback has been raised. That means that we have received data from our other end of the client socket, and now we must read our buffer to see what's in it. Okay, and now we're going to set the text box text property, and I'm going to make a method for this. Private void set text box. We'll call it append to text box. It accepts a string text. So we're going to create a method invoker is equal to new method invoker, and we're going to create an anonymous method. And in our anonymous method, we want to assign to the text box here. Well, not assign to it, but append to it. Oops. So textbox.text is equal to or plus equal to text. And when we do that, we want to actually add a return carriage and a new line. And actually add 2 of those. We're going to space it out a bit. And then we're going to say this dot invoke invoker. Okay, back to the receive callback. We're going to append to text box our text here, and then we're going to define our catch. Let's go to the client form and code that. So we are going to code the connect button. Before we do that, we're going to define our client socket. Okay, we're going to connect our client. So client socket is equal to new socket, and address family, internetwork, socket type stream, protocol type TCP. Client socket dot begin connect. So we're going to start connecting asynchronously. It's going to attempt to connect to this IP endpoint here. IP address. We're going to connect to our loopback, being the current machine or the current network interface, or the local host, whatever you want to call it. New async callback, connect callback, and we don't need to use the object state like always. It's a simple program. So let's define our connect callback. So this will be called when we have achieved a connection to the server. So async result AR. We're just going to end connect in here. Client socket dot end connect. That doesn't return anything. We're going to pass in AR and put a catch in there. Okay, so when the connect callback has been called, we can assume that we have successfully connected to the server. After that, we can enable the send button. Let's go back to the client form, double click on send, generate an event handler, and attempt to send some data to the server. So client socket.send, and we are going to create our buffer, byte array buffer is equal to, we can use encoding.ascii get bytes, and we are going to get bytes from our text box text, so we're just converting the text value of the text box to bytes so we can send it to the server. So we are going to begin sending. Begin send, and let's find the overload that we're going to use, so this one right here. Let's pass in our buffer, our offset 0, dot length, socket flags none, new async callback, send callback, and object state null. Okay, let's finish our catch here. And you can do stuff like this. You can do that and just do nothing. Assume that the server's closed or disconnected the client. I don't know how safe that is. I do this in synchronous socket programming because I really don't know a way around it, but really with async you can very much avoid this. So let's define our send callback. async result AR, and we're just going to end send. Client socket.end, and I think it returns the amount of bytes sent. So if successful, the number of bytes sent to the socket, otherwise an invalid socket error. So it is. And send, and we're going to pass an AR there. Okay, so let's boot it up. I probably forgot something. Actually, first let's go over to the server form and open up the TCP client directories. Go into bin debug, copy this, define our path to the client. That's what it's called, is it? Yeah. And we're just going to say process start path. And we're going to set our startup project to the server. And in that way, we're starting the client with the server. So we're going to connect. I'm going to send some data. And I can actually only send one piece of data. And let's put these new lines after the text so it doesn't look weird. We'll just reduce it to 1. Okay, so I still don't know why I can't send more than one message, but I did come across something that I forgot. I'll show you that right now. I'm just going to type 4 characters in there and send it. Well, let's take a look at the text received. So you'll just see that I've got a shit ton of null terminating characters. I think that's what they're called. And we don't want that. So let's get rid of those right now. So we're going to call it, we're going to say int received is equal to client socket and receive AR and receive will return the number of bytes received, and that's not going to be like the entire buffer or the buffer size. It's going to be the actual bytes that actually contain data, and not those zeros, which translate to the null terminating characters. Okay, so we're just going to resize the buffer. Now here's a way of doing it. You can do it this way. So array. You're going to end up using an array method, but you can do it however you please. Buffer, and the new size is going to be received. We're just trimming all of the data really, and you can resize it back to whatever it was. So client socket dot receive buffer size, and I need to pass in this buffer with the ref keyword because we are directly modifying it. Let's take a look at the text here to see how it looks. Send. Okay, sorry, I need to resize the buffer before I assign to this string text here. So start it up again. Connect. Send. There we are. It's actually a true value. Okay, so my problem is that I'm not starting to receive data again after I call and receive. So client socket dot begin receive. It's going to be the exact same thing as this line up top after the accept callback code. Okay, so let's run it again. So they start up together, and I'm going to connect, send some stuff. So that's it for this video. I'm going to have more videos that are workings of this project, and we'll just kind of make the project more robust and more flexible. And that's it. See you later.